The engine room thundered with noise, a metallic storm of revving trucks and clashing tools, when everything changed in a single breath. No one noticed her at first, the woman standing near the shadows at the far end of the motor pool, her uniform dusty from travel, her posture straight but quiet. Grease-stained mechanics rushed past her with clipboards and half-tightened bolts, officers barked orders across the concrete floor, and diesel fumes thickened the air like a fog. She stood still, unseen, unheard, and almost swallowed by the chaos. That was the moment the universe seemed to hold its breath, because the woman they were ignoring was about to stop the entire motor pool cold. The day had started cruelly early for her, long before the sun cut its first line across the horizon. She had arrived discreetly, deliberately avoiding the front gate and ceremonial greetings. She didn't want attention. She didn't want salutes. She only wanted to see the place with her own eyes, to feel the pulse of the unit she had been assigned to oversee after months of recovery. There were scars beneath her uniform, some on her body, some deeper, some quieter, that no briefing packet ever mentioned. She had been away longer than anyone expected, tucked behind hospital curtains, stitched back together after an explosion that nearly ended her career and convinced more than a few people that she wouldn't return at all. Stepping into the motor pool that morning felt like stepping into another lifetime. Most of the soldiers didn't recognize her. Rumors of her injury had passed through the ranks months earlier, fading into whispers like ghost stories told by exhausted privates who never met her. She had once commanded a battalion with a voice that could steady a storm, but absence makes even legends look like memories. So now she stood there, a stranger in her own house. She watched crews scramble to meet deadlines no one believed were realistic, watched lieutenants speaking too quickly to hide their uncertainty, watched senior NCOs pushing themselves past exhaustion because they felt responsible for everything that was collapsing. She could sense the stress in the air, thick as spilled oil. These were good soldiers, stretched thin, trying to hold a fractured system together. She understood that feeling far too well. The explosion months earlier had shattered more than bone, it cracked her confidence, her purpose, her sense of belonging. She had gone from a fearless leader to someone who doubted the way she walked across a room. Every step back into uniform felt heavier than the last, every glance from others a question she wasn't sure she could answer. She had been promoted while recovering, a strange irony that felt almost insulting. How could she wear a rank that suggested strength when she had spent nights fighting the ghosts of everything she had lost? That fear followed her into the motor pool like a shadow clinging to her boots. For a while, she wandered the space unnoticed. She observed the mess of paperwork left half-signed on a table, the delayed repairs piling up in a corner, the fatigued faces of soldiers who looked like they'd forgotten what sleep felt like. She saw a sergeant limping slightly, pretending he wasn't injured. She saw a private shaking after receiving criticism too harsh for anyone his age. She saw problems layered on problems, each one covered with a thin sheet of forced optimism. She felt her heart tighten. This wasn't neglect, this was a unit hurting from the inside. And the weight of it hit her with the force of a second explosion. Then the colonel saw her. He approached with irritation blooming across his face, the kind of expression reserved for lost civilians or nosy contractors. His boots clapped loudly across the floor as he marched toward her, each step fueled by the assumption that she didn't belong there. He didn't ask who she was. He didn't greet her. He only demanded to know why she was wandering around without authorization. His voice cut through the noise like a blade, drawing eyes from across the motor pool. Soldiers paused, watching the confrontation with uncomfortable curiosity. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her posture steady, refusing to let the tremor inside her chest show. She lifted her orders calmly. The colonel snatched them with a grunt, annoyed even before reading. His eyes skimmed the page. At first, nothing changed. Then his breathing hitched. A beat of silence followed. His jaw slackened as though the words had been carved from lightning. He blinked once, twice, then snapped his gaze back to her with a look that shifted from irritation to disbelief. His hand trembled slightly, the the paper fluttering. He stepped back, then straightened so fast it looked painful. Around them, conversations died mid-sentence. A wrench clattered to the floor. Engines quieted one by one until the motor pool was filled with stunned silence. When the colonel saluted her, the entire room realized what they were seeing. Her true rank, not the dusty uniform she wore, not the quiet presence she kept, spread across the paper like truth finally catching sunlight. A brigadier general. Returning. Watching. Standing among them like a ghost returned from war. The air shifted. Soldiers stared at her with widening eyes, whispers rippling like waves through the crowd. She felt her pulse hammer painfully in her ears. She didn't want spectacle. She didn't want reverence. She simply wanted to see her soldiers again. Yet she knew moments like this had a gravity of their own. The colonel lowered his salute, his voice lower, humbled, and tight with guilt. She gently took the orders back, relieving him from the torment of holding them any longer. She looked across the motor pool and saw fear, awe, confusion, and something else, hope. It stunned her. She had spent months believing she was returning broken, but the soldiers weren't looking at her scars. They were looking at someone who had come back. Someone who hadn't abandoned them. Someone who understood what it meant to fight your way back from nothing. In that silence, the weight of her journey cracked open inside her. She had spent so long trying to stand tall again that she had forgotten the power of simply standing at all. Her soldiers didn't need perfection. They needed presence. They needed someone who saw their struggles the same way she saw her own. Maybe her heart still shook, maybe her body still ached, but she was there. And that meant something. The colonel requested permission to resume operations, but she asked him instead to walk her through the motor pool and show her everything, the breakdowns, the backlogs, the stress points, the human exhaustion no report ever captured. As they walked, she listened. Really listened. She didn't interrupt with authority or drown them in orders. She let them speak their frustrations, their fears, their attempts to keep the unit alive under impossible pressure. The soldiers slowly relaxed as they realized she wasn't there to judge them. She was there to lift the weight they had been carrying alone. By midday, the motor pool felt different. She rolled up her sleeves, inspected engines, offered insight from years of field experience. She didn't hover above them, she worked beside them, quietly proving that leadership wasn't about rank pinned to cloth but about heart. She mentored young soldiers who had lost confidence, encouraged mechanics who felt forgotten, and reminded senior leaders that vulnerability was not weakness. She also addressed the systemic issues the unit had been suffering from, promising changes supported by her authority. But what mattered more than any promise was how she moved through the space, each moment rebuilding a connection she feared was lost forever. The soldiers felt it. They felt her sincerity, her resilience, her willingness to stand in the grit with them. The respect they gave her wasn't forced by protocol, it grew like a heartbeat returning after a long silence. The motor pool slowly came back to life, but now the energy felt steadier, grounded, almost hopeful. By evening, she stood once more at the edge of the motor pool. The sun dipped low, painting the concrete gold. Soldiers continued working, but there was an ease in their movements, a renewed sense of purpose. She watched them with quiet pride, her chest warm in a way she hadn't felt in months. She had returned unsure of her place, but she found it again in the simplest truth: leaders don't rise because they never fall. They rise because they stand up anyway. And as she watched her soldiers rebuild their confidence piece by piece, she realized she had been doing the same thing all along. If this story reached something tender in your heart, if it made you feel even a little of the strength hidden inside people who keep fighting long after the world believes they're done, please support this video so more souls can feel that spark too. Special request to comment: share a moment when someone surprised you with courage you didn't expect. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day settle into her bones and dissolve there, replaced by something steadier. She stepped forward into the fading light, ready to lead, not as a legend,